Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with Unit 12, Lesson number 5, Communist Expansion in Vietnam. What we're going to talk about, of course, is the expansion of communism throughout Southeast Asia. And the focus, of course, is going to be when Vietnam. Now, Vietnam was a place called Indochina when it was a French colony. And when the French move out, the fear is that communism will move in. And we are going to have communism there. We're going to have communism in communist North Vietnam, and in South Vietnam, we're going to have a democratic government. And what the United States of America, pledges to do, of course, is to prevent communism, help those nations that want to prevent communism from spreading, to do what we could economically and eventually militarily to help them resist communism. What we're going to do, of course, is look at our 4-unit focus questions, identify and describe Kennedy and Johnson's domestic and foreign policy goals, trials, and accomplishments, identify the origin, major players, strategies, and accomplishments of the modern civil rights movement, describe the impact the Vietnam War had on American life and politics, and what impact did the civil rights movement have on the underserved and underrepresented groups in America. Once again, we have vocabulary. Do what we always tell you to do. Take out your journals, write these terms down, define them yourselves, and we'll address as many of them as we can, of course, as they come up in the lesson. Today, we'll start with the listen focus question: what prompted U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and how did American involvement in Vietnam escalate during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations? Do Now activity. Journal topic: recount what the domino theory is based on prior to the lessons you have taken. Now, we've talked about the domino theory, of course, before. So think about that for a few seconds. In a few moments, we'll come right back and we'll tell you what domino theory, of course, kind of means. Domino theory is one of those terms that's kind of associated with communism. And throughout Southeast Asia, one of the things that Eisenhower believed, and it starts in the 1950s with him, is he believed that if we allow one nation in Southeast Asia, of course, to fall to communism, then other nations throughout the region, of course, would fall like dominoes. So if you kick over South Vietnam and allow it to be communist, and then maybe Laos becomes communist, and then Cambodia becomes communist. So the fear was that if we allowed a communist threat to go unchecked, it could cause an entire region, of course, to turn to communism. All right, what we're going to start with, of course, is French Indochina. Now, we told you that before Vietnam was Vietnam, it was French Indochina. It was a place that was a colony, of course, for France. Well, the French, after some civil wars there, with their trying to resist and kick out the French control, the French finally give up and leave. Now, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam were this region called Indochina and was colonized by the French in the 1800s until Japan took control during World War II. The French tried to reestablish control of Vietnam after the defeat of Japan, but were opposed by communists led by Ho Chi Minh. Now, Ho Chi Minh, of course, the leader of the Communist North, wanted the South, of course, to become communist also. The French withdrew by way of the Geneva Accords from Vietnam after the defeat of Dien Bien Phu by the Viet Minh, even though the French had American support. So the Geneva Accords split Vietnam at the 17th parallel, with communist North Vietnam under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh and the national South Vietnam led by Ngo Dien Diem. So what we have is a mess, really. Now, that should have been an indication that when the United States of America couldn't help the French maintain control, it probably should have been a clue to American politicians that maybe Vietnam is not where we need to be. But that's just one man's opinion. We're there, now what do we do? Well, here's a picture of the region. You have the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north, which is communist. You see the yellow star, of course, in the red background. And in the south, you had the state of South Vietnam, of course, which was nationalist. On the left, you have Ho Chi Minh, a young Ho Chi Minh, who's the leader of communist North Vietnam. And then on the right, you have Ngo Dien Diem, who is the nationalist leader of South Vietnam. American involvement in Vietnam. Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson all escalated U.S. involvement in Vietnam. The prevailing idea was that if left unchecked, the communist North would take over the South, and Vietnam would be the next line of dominoes that would fall to communism. Ngo Dien Diem's unpopularity with the South Vietnamese people because of his rejection of Buddhism and his refusal to allow elections to unify Vietnam, the Viet Cong were South Vietnamese communist rebels that took up arms against the nationalists led by Diem and the U.S. combat troops thereafter March 1965. So, if you are the United States of America, now you think about this for a second. You have to fight the communists in the north, the Viet Minh, and now you're also having to fight South Vietnamese who are Viet Cong or communists in North Vietnam, or South Vietnamese communists. Now the United States of America finds itself in a kind of a tough spot, and we're going to find that the dynamics at play here is going to not allow for the United States of America to have a great amount of easy success here, and it's going to become a protracted U.S. involvement. LBJ's Vietnam, the beginning. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was passed after North Vietnamese attacked American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin and allowed LBJ to send 180,000 combat troops to Vietnam. By the end of 1966, 360,000 American troops were in Vietnam. LBJ resisted the idea of attacking the North Vietnamese for fear that China and the Soviet Union might intervene, and instead mostly targeted Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops sent to South Vietnam. The guerrilla tactics used by the Viet Cong neutralized American efforts to gain a quick victory and caused significant questions to be asked about American involvement at home. This is the first war that Americans see on televisions every evening. So when you come home, off your job, you turn on the television, and on the nightly report, you see pictures of Vietnam and what's happening in Vietnam. Engaging the Viet Cong. Now, you have a situation where one of the biggest issues was they had home field advantage, and they had these tunnels underneath the ground. They could pop up anywhere and then disappear into the jungle. And one of the things the United States of America did, of course, is we had tunnel rats. And when you look at this tunnel rat, he's on the left, and he's given the responsibility of taking a gun, going down in these tunnels, and trying to flush out the Viet Cong. Now, one of the things the United States of America does, of course, is we use napalm and we use something called DDT to kill the foliage in Vietnam, and that's going to cause even more issues a little bit later because people believe that that's one of the things that caused a lot of Vietnam veterans, of course, to develop cancer. Here's some Vietnam War images. JFK and the Vietnam War. So we went from Eisenhower to LBJ, JFK. We will pause for a few minutes and allow you to look at a video on JFK's actions in the escalation in Vietnam. So it's under JFK, of course, that we see this huge escalation, and it only gets even worse, of course, during Johnson administrations. Once again, what I want you to do is view the video by going to the lesson description, accessing it, completing the activities, and once you've done, convert it to a PDF file, turn it to your teacher, be graded, and good luck. So at this time, go ahead and navigate to the lesson description, find the video, and start the activity. All right. I hope you enjoyed that activity, of course, on JFK and Vietnam. Make sure that, once again, that you convert your work to a PDF and turn to your teacher to be graded. Now, when you look at it, Vietnam becomes an albatross around the neck of LBJ, and because of Vietnam, he doesn't run again for president in 1968. So it becomes a very big deal. Lesson focus question. What prompted U.S. involvement in Vietnam? And then how did American involvement in Vietnam escalate during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations? What prompted U.S. involvement in Vietnam? The U.S. initially went to Vietnam to aid the French resistance against communism, and after the Geneva Accords, the U.S. became the chief protector of South Vietnam, and continued incursion from the communist North Vietnam will only strengthen American resolve under JFK, LBJ, and Nixon. How did American involvement in Vietnam escalate during the Kennedy and Johnson administration? JFK sent advisors to South Vietnam to aid the South Vietnamese rebels or resistance, and LBJ sent 180,000 combat troops after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and by the end of 1966, U.S. had over 360,000 combat troops in Vietnam. So we went from advisors to primarily the protectors of South Vietnam. Well, I hope you guys gained some valuable insight on Vietnam and what the United States of America got involved in, and then some of the things, of course, that led to the United States of America, kind of, bogging down a little bit in Vietnam, and it cost, of course, LBJ the election of 1968, And we're going to find that it's going to change the way Americans see war. Now, remember now, Vietnam is the first war that Americans actually see the war, of course, on the news. So they see images of the war in terms of what happens with, you know, correspondents, of course, that go over and and report back to from the fronts. Once again, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877. As I always tell you, don't take my word for it. Do your own research to reach your own conclusions. And with that, we'll see you next time.